So, Jainan to everybody. Uh, as we are aware that most Indian philosophies accept the principle of reincarnation, rebirth. Charvak and Ajivak do not accept this theory. Some people of Western countries also accept rebirth. Most sciences have remained silent on this issue. But since the 1960s, many researchers from Virginia University of America are still working on it. The present RTM has been organized to understand the issue scientifically and philosophically. This is the first RTM on this subject. Today's keynote speaker is Dr. Subhas Jain, USA. Other speakers are Dr. Ashok Jain, Dr. Jeffrey Long, and Dr. Pratap Sancheti. Before we start lectures, I request everybody, please do not disturb during the talk. Discussion will take place after all the talks are completed. If anyone has any question or query, it should be precise and crisp, related with the topic, without any prefix and suffix. I think with this, I request first of all our this Dev Kumar Saab is there.
Purvi, I'll
Yes.
ask you to call Dr. Sancheti. I don't see him here because he's a speaker. He ought to be present here, I guess.
Yes.
So can we wait for
Yes.
1 minute, sir?
Yes. Yes. Definitely.
जब तक मंगलाचरण करते हैं ना देव कुमार
हाँ,
सर
पर आप
मंगलाचरण
फोन
हाँ,
लगाइए उनको, क्यों नहीं आए वो?
हाँ, फोन से बात करें. In the meantime, I request Dr. Dev Kumar ji for the Manglacharan.
Jai Janendra to all of you. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Airiyanam, Namo Uvachayanam, Namo Loke Mokaro, Savvapapa Panasano, Mangalanancha Savvesim, Padamam Avai Mangalam.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dev Kumar Saab. So, though I have circulated a biodata of all the speakers, but before starting the lecture by Dr. Subhas Jain, I will like to give a brief introduction. Dr. Subhas Jain is a professor emeritus in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering in University of Iowa, USA. He has in-depth knowledge of Jain text of Karnan Yoga. He has published several articles and authored 3 books and presented many lectures on the karma doctrine. He is keenly interested in delving into the nature of reality. Now I invite Dr. Subhas Jain to speak on Virginia University research and karma theory. Dr. Subhas Jain, please.
मुझे होस्ट बना दीजिए, मुझे स्लाइड दिखानी है जब होस्ट बना दीजिए.
Yes. I think
you are already co-host sir.
You are already there.
ओके
Yes.
ओके ओके.
और कोई स्पीकर को प्रेजेंटेशन करना है तो बता दीजिए. आई विल मेक यू को-होस्ट.
Okay, I think let me begin thanking Anil Bhai to. You can see my topic of my talk is reincarnation, Virginia University research and karma theory. It has 2 aspects. The first, Virginia University research deals with scientific aspect of reincarnation, and karma theory deals with the philosophical aspect of reincarnation. Let me just briefly give you background of the reincarnation. The twin doctrines of karma and rebirth are the fundamental principles of Jain Darshan. This everybody knows that. But many people are skeptical of the twin doctrines because they consider them as explanatory hypotheses that have not been yet empirically verified. Moreover, there is a distinct group within society called scientists who are not convinced that reincarnation is a well substantiated phenomenon, as there is no empirical evidence of the existence of the soul. For the last 8 decades, a small group of scientists have been investigating unusual phenomena that are not possible to explain based on the current scientific knowledge, but support the existence of the soul. Three main unusual phenomena are remembrance of past life by children, out of body and near death experiences, and message from the dead received by a medium. Though all three phenomena corroborate the existence of soul, neither of the last two phenomena of reincarnation. I will therefore talk only about the studies on remembrance of past life, which in short I call ROPL, by children, which offer rational evidence of reincarnation. The emphasis on the studies on ROPL by children is on verification of the statements made by such children about previous life by tracking down a person who lived a life that corresponds to the statements and claims made by one of these children. Though the interest in such a study began in the late 19th century, the systematic investigation by employing rigorous scientific methods for collection and analysis of data was conducted since 1960 by a group consisting of Dr. Ian Stevenson, an eminent professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, and his associates. Based on these studies, Stevenson concluded that the phenomenon of rebirth is the best explanation of these children's memories. Let me briefly describe, the question is why I am studying reincarnation. Let me briefly describe the two episodes that coerced me to examine the topic of reincarnation.
Sir, have you share your screen?
Oh,
We are
yeah.
unable to see.
Oh boy. Let me let me just try that. What 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 should I do?
So recording is going on.
Okay,
Yes,
share.
sir.
Okay, let me see. Can you see now?
No.
Share done.
No.
No?
No.
No? Boy, what should I do?
You close the presentation, save it on the desktop, and then open it. Then you do the screen sharing.
Okay, close it. Okay, let me close it. And
Today सर pause कर दीजिए recording.
boy, come on, I am out of Zoom now. What I'm supposed to do? Okay.
तो ग्रीन बटन सर प्रेस करिए ना, शेयर वाला.
है?
ग्रीन है ना
भाई
शेयर.
बहुत हाँ गेयर हाँ ये ओके ग्रीन ओके
हाँ, फिर आपके
एंड
स्क्रीन
देन
आपका पीपीटी डेस्कटॉप पे होगा या जो भी है वहीं से आप सिलेक्ट कर लीजिएगा. यस. नहीं, ये तो हाँ, वो जो है ना आपका स्क्रीन।
Boy, I need तो वो तो कहीं चली गई भाई।
रिकॉर्डिंग पॉज कर दीजिए अभी।
हाँ, रिकॉर्डिंग पॉज करो यार, वो तो मेरी वो गायब हो गई। वो स्टार्ट फ्रॉम द बिगिनिंग और डू यू थिंक आई
नहीं,
कैन?
आगे से ले लीजिए, कोई बात नहीं है। हाँ,
ओके, ओके नाउ आई थिंक
ये रिकॉर्डिंग भी चालू
लेट
कर
मी,
लीजिए सर।
हो गया।
ओके, I think yeah. Okay, let me start here now. Uh, why I'm studying reincarnation? I think I would like to share you two episodes that coerced me to examine the topic of reincarnation. The first event occurred in early 90s when I took 1 year leave of absence from my job to take care of my widowed father in India. During that period, I was exposed to the Jain scripture Gomatsar Karam Kand, from which my father used to preach Jain Karma doctrine every day to a small group of people in the Jain community. This short exposure to the scripture kindled my interest in Jain scriptures. Consequently, I took an early retirement in 2003 to study Jain philosophy, particularly the Jain Karma doctrine. In 2019, I received a PhD degree in Jainology from the University of Madras, Chennai, India. The second event occurred in the fall of 2021 while I was teaching an introductory course on Jainism at the University of Dayton, Ohio. One day, I was giving a lecture on the rebirth process and the four gatis, the realms of existence. I explained to my students that one can get an inkling of one's next gati by introspecting one's past actions. I had an alien feeling after that class, as myself never introspected my past action. For the first time in my life, I introspected my past action to contemplate whether I will be born as a human being in the next life, and concluded that due to one bad past action, I will have to liquidate some of my karmic debt to ensure the Manush Gati in my next life. So I decided to live as a Nashtik Shravak. A Nashtik Shravak pursues the path of 11 Pratimas. I contacted some leading people of Jain society for their support, including Sulekh Bhai, but they advised me to live a life of Nashtik Shravak at home, as I was too old to live at a place managed by the Jain society. I took their advice. Now I live in an intentional community in a one-room studio apartment where I am living a minimalist lifestyle of a celibate. I wear one type of clothes, sleep on a takhat, practice intermittent fasting with a vegan diet, and spend most of my time in Swadhyaya. Now, if the phenomena of reincarnation, as shown by Stevenson and his associates, is factual, then these studies also confirm that human souls come back in the next life in the new body of humans. According to the karma doctrine, only those humans whose karmic debt is below a threshold value are reborn as humans in the next life. As the karmic debt depends on the action performed by the doer of the actions, it would be in everybody's interest to find out the type of action that lead to a karmic debt below this threshold by investigating the actions of some deceased person, which Stevenson called previous personalities who were reborn as humans. Okay, now I want to give some salient features of these ROPL studies. Now, some people have dismissed ROPL studies due to a few fraudulent claims of past memories. I wish to emphasize that evidence of reincarnation is based on thousands of ROPL cases and is not appropriate to collectively dismiss thousands of published cases because a few cases of fraud were discovered. The salient features of studies supervised by the group of Stevenson and his associate are as follows. Now you can see the group has investigated more than 2,600 cases from various countries that include northern India, Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, South Central Turkey, Lebanon, Syria, West Africa, Europe, and US, and from cultures of both believers and non-believers in rebirth. Now, the children are quite young when they begin describing another life, with an average age being 35 months. So they are very young. They are less than 3 years old. Most of the children stop talking about their past life by the time they are 6 or 7. The time interval between the previous personality, death, and the subject, which is the child, the birth is usually less than 3 years. Now you can see the gestation period is only 9 months, and the time interval average is less than 3 years. So it's more than 9 months. So we'll have to take care of this question where this soul goes in between times. The median interval varies from culture to culture and ranges from 4 months, which is less than 9 months, and to 141 months, which is almost 12 years, so which is very large. Now, in few cases, such as the rebirth story of Sumitra as Shiva, the soul of the adult previous personality, which was Shiva, does not take rebirth as a child, but enters the dead body of the adult subject Sumitra, who came back to life. Actually, in this case, this Sumitra was about 22 years old, and she was declared dead, and they were preparing her body for cremation. And when they were preparing her body in cremation, she became alive. And then she said, she's not Sumitra, but she's Shiva. So the time interval between the death of Shiva and revival of Sumitra was 2 months. So again, we have to find out where the soul of Sumitra, before she entered in the body of Shiva, was located. Now, most of the children don't have any memories regarding events that occurred between the death of the previous personality and their own birth. But there are few cases. In 276 cases out of 1,200 cases, which is about 23%, the children claim to remember not only previous lives, but also a time between lives. So there are several cases, 200 cases, in which they do remember the life in between. Now, the most important thing here is these birthmark and birth defects. These children bodies, they have birthmark and birth defect occurs in about 35% of the children of these cases. Now, nearly all of them corresponds to wounds to usually fatal ones, or other marks on the previous personality. So those birthmarks correspond to the wounds or the fatal ones on the previous personality. Now, they provided much superior evidence than provided by the oral testimony of informants for the cases. Because of the availability of the postmortem reports that give the location of the wounds on the body of the previous personality, and the birthmarks or the birth can be seen on the body of child. So there is a really empirical evidence that there are wounds marks on the postmortem reports, and then we have these birthmarks and birth defects on the child body, and they are on the same location, so we can compare those. Now, some of the children have major congenital malformation, such as greatly deformed lips or even complete absence of finger, toes, or hands. Now, such children, when they begin to talk about their previous lives, they recall that when the previous personality was killed in the previous life, the murderer severed the deformed or missing organs or limb before killing. So they know their limbs were killing or their fingers were cut off, and they found when they were born, those parts were missing. So this is another good proof of proof that the previous life was there. The post-mortem reports of the previous personality confirm such deformed or missing limbs or organs. Now, there's another important aspect of the studies. The child may display unusual traits such as phobias, interests, and skills that are unusual in the child family, but they correspond to traits the previous personality was known to have had. Phobias were found to occur in about 50% of cases in which the previous personality died violently. For example, if the previous personality died in drowning, the child would have a phobia of water. If the previous personality died being shot, the child may have phobia of firearm. Now, some children show likings or aversion for certain foods. For example, one child craved for sticky rice, to which his family was indifferent, but which had been the favorite food of the previous personality. So you can see these behavior traits are carried to the next life. Some children even demanded an intoxicant such as alcohol, tobacco, or cannabis derivatives. They claim to remember previous lives in which these substances solaced them. 9% of the children reported living a previous life as a member of the opposite sex. So this is another surprise statistics. Only 9% of the cases there is a change in sex. If they were male in the previous life, they are born female in the next life. In those cases, the children often showed gender non-conformity, and they sometimes identified themselves as the opposite sex. So this is what we call this lesbian and gay cases, LSGBT cases. I think these are related to these 9% cases. Now, in cases where we have monozygotic twins or conjoined or Siamese twins, showed wide difference in the personalities of the two people. Stevenson conjectured that the marked difference in their personality may have risen from their personality traits in the previous lives. In one of the Siamese twins, one twin was very calm and quiet, and the other twin was very angry child. And they found in their previous life that the same was the case. The child who was calm and quiet was in previous life was a very calm and quiet person, and same with the other child who was very angry, and he was also had temper in the previous life. Now, I want to just make a proposal for future studies. Now, the growing interest of many scientists in the above mentioned three unusual phenomena, including reincarnation, suggest that these scientists now believe in the existence of some form of continued consciousness. Now they use the word some form of continued consciousness. They don't use the word soul, but they think there is some form of continued consciousness after death, which I think is what is we call uh,
इधर आना
okay, yeah.
अरे इधर तो आ थोड़ा ये सब क्या हो रहा है कि मुझे तो समझ में नहीं आ रहा
Okay, then, yeah, what happened?
No, please, nothing.
Okay,
Please go ahead. Please go ahead, sir.
okay. In other words, they are convinced there is a sufficient empirical evidence that corroborates the existence of the soul, hence reincarnation.
हाँ आवाज आना
The ROPL
तो आवाज तो आ रहा है नहीं आ रहा है
The real cases offer a path for gathering empirical verification to support some aspect of the twin doctrines of karma and rebirth. Now, various children have unique features and traits, such as birthmarks, birth defects, congenital malformation, emotions, phobia, interests, skills, etc., that cannot be explained satisfactorily solely by a combination of genetic, which we call nature, and environmental nurture and influence. Because the current scientific model is nature versus nurture, or genetic versus environmental, but they cannot explain all these salient, these unique features or traits of the children by this model. If such unique feature and trait could not be explained satisfactorily by, if can be explained by karmic influences as additional causal factor, then it will prove the karma doctrine and subjects would develop belief in it. Moreover, most people who believe in reincarnation would like to find out the type of action that lead to the Manushgati in the next life, which can be determined by examining the action of the previous personality, which in turn can be found by interviewing family members, friends, and acquaintances. It can be argued that non-violent actions lead to the Manushgati in the next life. Non-violent action, in my understanding, are action that do not hurt oneself and other living beings. So based on this above discussion, I propose the following two topics for future research. One is explain the unique features and traits of ROPL children with various karmas. We know there are 8 main types and 148 subtypes of karma. The feature and traits of children are controlled by one or more subtypes of karma. For example, what is happening? For example, the phobia is controlled by the Bhaya Naukashaya Mohiniya Karma. I think you will know there are nine Naukashaya, and one Kashaya is Bhaya Naukashaya. So phobia is controlled by Bhaya Naukashaya Mohiniya Karma. So what I'm suggesting that identify the subtypes of karma that control the features and traits of children and explain them satisfactorily using the function of the subtypes of karma and the life of associated previous personality. For example, phobia can be explained this bhaya now kashai, and if we know the function of bhaya now kashai, then I can explain these phobia. Similarly, one should be able to explain other features, other traits. Now, the second proposal I says is test the hypothesis that non-violent action lead to the manushgati in the next life. Now, this can be determined the nature of action of previous personality by interviewing family members, friends, and acquaintances. If the action of the previous personality were not found non-violent, as defined above, determine whether it is necessary to redefine violent actions or to re-examine the hypothesis that non-violent actions lead to the Manushgati in the next life. So if the hypothesis that Manushgati lead to the next life is not valid, then we'll have to come up with a different hypothesis. So I think if one can try these two proposals, try to use karma doctrine to explain the traits of these children, and then try to find out the action done by the previous personality, I think it will help us to understand the karma doctrine and the rebirth process. Thank you. Okay. If you have, I think I don't know whether we want to handle questions now or we'll like to have questions later. Anil bhai? Can you hear me?
We will take questions in later.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. I'm done then.
Okay. Just now, second speaker is Dr. Ashok Jain. You are mute.
Subhash sir, can you stop screen sharing?
Okay, now it is clear. So our next speaker is Dr. Ashok Jain, and I shall like to give a brief introduction of Dr. Ashok ji. He is an eminent expert in nuclear structure physics at the Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee since 1979, and also has many assignments in various universities in India and abroad. He has deep knowledge of Jain canons. He has been honored with many awards for his contributions, like the English translation of Dabla, editing of several commemoration volumes, articles, etc. He presently leads the Ganeshwarni Digambar Jain Sansthan at Varanasi that was established by his father, Pandit Fulchand Shastri ji, who was one of the most renowned Jain scholars of 20th century, having contributed immensely to the development of Jain karma theory and Prakrit literature. Now I invite Dr. Ashok Jain to deliver his talk on challenges in the logical understanding of reincarnation in the framework of Jain karma theory. Now, Dr. Ashok Jain, please. Uh,
Yeah, thank you, Anilji.
yeah.
Everybody can hear, listen to that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I thank the JS also very much, and Dr. Anil Kumar ji for inviting me to make this presentation here. This is a brief presentation and I will start. So, first of all, I would like to make a small distinction between rebirth and reincarnation. The meeting has been conceptualized around reincarnation. I like this idea that reincarnation is a higher form of rebirth. This comes from the Vedic philosophy, basically. Anyone who dies takes rebirth. This is the belief of all the Eastern philosophies. But the souls which are more evolved on their path to liberation, they are said to reincarnate. For example, the birth of Mahavir or birth of Buddha may be termed as reincarnation. It is well known that in Buddhism, the Dalai Lama always reincarnates, and he is even able to predict his place of reincarnation in the next life. So, this distinction of rebirth and reincarnation is more prevalent in Vedic and Buddhist traditions. In the light of this, I will now start with a personal experience, which I have not shared so far anywhere in public and even in private, except for maybe a couple of close friends. As Anilji mentioned, my father, Pandit Phulchand Shastri, was a very grounded and very eminent scholar of Jain Karma Shastra. And he has made, I think, the foremost contribution to the Jain Agams in the 20th century. His major contributions consist of 16 volumes of Dhawla, total full contribution to the 7 volumes of Mahabharata, and 16 volumes of Jai Dhawla. So these 39 volumes, he spent his entire life in creating this literature, where he went through the original Prakrit Sutras, spanning tens of thousands of pages he published. And in this context, I can say that he was a grandmaster of this field, and he was honored also many times for this, but he was equally hated also for this vast contribution. So Panditji was on his deathbed for the last couple of months of his life at my home in Roorkee, at IIT Roorkee. And last 2 months he spent in a semi-conscious state. He had no physical pain or any other problem. It is surprisingly, I found that many people were visiting him, but suddenly one day his younger brother showed up from Veena, Madhya Pradesh, who has never visited us for probably last 30 years or 40 years. So Panditji passed away on 31st January 1991, a few days after the arrival of my uncle. It was a very calm and quiet day, and on an instinct, I had an inner instinct that I should not go to my offices today. So I decided not to go, and I sat quietly in the room where Panditji lay across the room, about 10 feet away from me. I was meditating and doing jap of Namokar mantra in my heart. Occasionally, I will open my eyes and look towards my father. And at 10:10 a.m., as I glanced towards him, I felt a great force leaving his heart as he lay with palms upturned. I could distinctly feel that something has left from him. I immediately stood up. I went to him and checked his heartbeat and realized that he is no more. At that time, my uncle, the father's younger brother, was taking his meal. I waited for 5 minutes. As soon as he has finished, I informed him and also called my wife from her school. There was no doubt in my mind that I have observed the departure of his soul when he died. This was mainly because I was born and brought up in a family where these beliefs were taken for granted, and I did not need to read any scripture to believe it. But this was the most direct contact with such a spiritual phenomena for me. And later on in my life, when I read other scriptures, for example, according to the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, his soul left from the heart where Anahata Chakra resides. And even in Hindu scriptures, they say that persons living body in this manner go to the Devlok as per Hindu scriptures. Now, in this context, I once asked my father when he was maybe 6 months before he left this world. I used to joke with him and talk to him in jest. I asked him very clearly, where will he go after he dies? He looked at me and took some time to ponder over the question. And then he answered very thoughtfully. See, I had asked the question jokingly, but he gave a very serious answer, very seriously. He said, I will go to the fourth heaven, at least fourth heaven. I did not know what it meant at that time because I have not studied the classification of heavens and Adholok and Urdhloks in the Jain cosmology, and so I didn't know all this. Now, this experience is a personal experience, but it does give me a confidence in some of the hypotheses, for example, that Dr. Subhash Jain was mentioning. Reincarnation is indeed a very mysterious concept and is central to all the Indic religious beliefs such as Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism. In fact, the heart of Hinduism is the Vedic literature, which comprises the Veda, the Upanishads, which touch upon these topics while talking about karmic dynamics. In fact, the karmic theories are fundamental to all the three philosophical beliefs, but it is most elaborately expounded in the Jain scriptures. You can see that I could see that by the 39 volumes that I saw being created in my home, my father working on them. So, the rebirth and reincarnation play a central role in the dynamics of karma and fruition of karma in the cycle of birth, death, a process integral to Jain karma theory. Existence of an immortal soul is essential to the working of this whole process. Breaking away from this cycle of death and rebirth is termed as the moksha or liberation. This is the ultimate goal of all the teachings and practices that are prescribed in the Jain scriptures. How the soul moves between birth and death and rebirth is the subject matter of the Jain agamas that I mentioned in the beginning, the 39 volumes. The Vedic and Buddhist schools talk vaguely about karma as internal bhava only, somehow preserved by traces or sanskars left on the mind or the soul. They have a very broad classification of karma, like Sanchit karma, the Prarabdha karma, and the Kriyamana karma. A description of the nature of death and rebirth is described in detail by both Upanishads as well as Buddhist scriptures. For example, Kathopanishad and Kenopanishad, they do describe these things in quite detail. And there are Buddhist texts which discuss in very great detail what happens immediately after death and how the soul moves. But we don't have any such descriptions in Jain scriptures. However, it is only Jains who put forth theories of how the passions like rag, dvesh, moh, they convert to karmic matter, which attaches to the soul and how many pradeshas they occupy, what function, what is the function prakriti, like Vedaniya, etc. Their duration of the bondage with the soul, the sthiti bandh, and their fruition, the anuvag bandh, as pleasure, pain, sata vedaniya or asata vedaniya karma, and falling away from the soul, which we call nirjara. So, such a detailed description of the interaction of the jiva, the soul, with matter, formation of karmic matter, and the role of various noble, ignoble, and wicked passions and actions is not found elsewhere. It was just mentioned by Dr. Subhash Jain that there are 8 types of karmas and 148 types of sub-karmas, subgroups. So it is a matter of great astonishment that such a complex web of classification, processes, and actions were even thought of by our acharyas who wrote these canons. This dynamics of karmas already decides where and in which gati and kul a soul will be reborn. This is the question raised by Dr. Subhash Jain also, that what type of karmas will lead to the Manusya Gati. So, however, Jains do not discuss much about what happens between death and birth. The scriptures do talk about the motion of soul taking one turn, two turns, or at the most 3 turns. But it does not have any more details of the happenings between death and next birth. According to the Jain scripture, the next birth happens almost immediately. There is nothing like a Pretyoni or a life in limbo talked about. However, there are Devaloks and Narakloks described where a soul might take birth. So the Jain belief of the existence of a soul which is individual to each individual being. That means every soul is individual. It raises some interesting questions. For example, what makes one soul different from the other? Or is it that all the souls are eventually identical? Like all the electrons are identical, all the protons are identical. Another law that is propounded is the conservation of souls. This is necessary. This means that all the souls in the universe are kind of immortal, and therefore the number of souls in the universe should be constant. To overcome this problem, Jain canons resort to the counting of souls in terms of infinities. Since Jains believe in the freedom of individual and every individual soul must liberate itself, what is the nature of the souls after liberation? Once all the karmas have been shed, all the ghatiya and aghatiya karmas have been, nirjara has happened, do these souls still remain distinct from each other? If yes, then in what respect? Or once the souls reach the Siddhalok, all the souls become identical? I did not find any answer to this question. Another question that needs to be answered is related to the ultra microscopic nature of the karma parmanus. Very fine. They are supposed to be finest matter particles. Consider parmanus of Vedaniya karma, for example. We know that chemical changes happen in our bodies when pleasure and pain are caused. According to Jains, these changes are preceded by the maturing of Satavedaniya or Asatavedaniya karmic material atoms or their aggregates, which we call skandha. Quite often, the past karmas affect our life in subtle ways without any significant changes directly observable in our bodies. At other times, there are directly observable changes like a deformity, a sickness, or a disease that erupts without any warning. When we feel happy, we know that certain happy hormones are secreted. So the big question that arises is the following: how does the karmic matter gets converted to observable physical changes in our bodies, which is the ordinary matter, the Pudgal, ordinary matter that we see everywhere in our life. This question was actually raised to me by Dr. Padmanabh S. Jaini, who was at the University of California. Now he is no more. And he entrusted me with the job. He said he knew that I'm a physicist. So he said that Ashok, you can solve this problem. And then he pointed out the exact places in Sarvat Siddhi where a discussion is given. And he said, this I think is the only question that Jains have to answer now. I end my presentation here with this remark that we have some very interesting uh, issues which probably can be answered if we pursue them rigorously and in a doggedly manner. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashok ji. You have put some questions, and definitely we should give some answer to this, or we should conclude something out of this. Now I request Dr. Jeffrey Long to deliver his lecture. And actually, I am thankful to him. He is traveling now. Even then, he accepted our request to deliver his talk. I shall like to give a brief introduction of Dr. Jeffrey, though he has already mentioned in his bio data, and that I have circulated in the abstract book. So, Dr. Jeffrey Long is a prominent professor of religion, philosophy, and Asian studies in Pennsylvania, USA. He authored 5 books, including Jainism and Introduction, and published various articles, many of them on Jain topics. He has been earlier, he has been editor, co-editor of many books and volumes. He is winner of Danam Book Award 2022 for his book Hinduism in America, a convergence of world. Now I invite Dr. Jeffrey Long to give a talk on case studies of Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker. Dr. Long, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Jain and Jajanindra, to everyone. And I'm grateful for your including me today. And yes, even though I'm traveling, I wanted very much to be part of this conversation. This topic is very dear to my heart. A couple of speakers have already mentioned personal experiences. I'll just say very briefly that my own father passed away when I was quite young, when I was 12 years old. And this started really what has become a kind of lifelong exploration of this topic. And so my talk is going to, it'll be a brief talk, culminate with discussion of Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker's work. But I want to give a bit of a philosophical background as well. Initially, basically, this is an argument for the idea of rebirth. And so I will share my screen. Hopefully, my screen is visible to everyone?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So the reality of rebirth, I call this outline of a defense of reincarnation. It's an outline because, of course, to do this in effectively in great detail would take much more time than we have today. But if we look philosophically, if we raise the question of what happens to our consciousness, what happens to us after the body dies, there are, of course, many, many possibilities, but they tend to cluster around 3 main options. And these are, of course, the one we've been discussing: reincarnation, rebirth, punarjanma. This is a concept shared by the Jain, Hindu, Buddhist, and Sikh traditions, by ancient Western traditions such as Platonism, Neoplatonism. The ancient Celtic cultures held a belief in rebirth. Then, if you look at the esoteric forms of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, you see this belief, not so much in mainstream Islam and Christianity, but in the more esoteric practices. And then what is now called New Age thought. As Dr. Subhash Jain mentioned, many people in the West have adopted this belief now. So a lot of people believe in some version of rebirth. Now, of course, there are many ways of explaining rebirth within these traditions, but we're looking at this from a very broad perspective now. So, some kind of rebirth. Then you have the idea of one single everlasting afterlife. You have heaven or hell, paradise or damnation, and that this goes on forever and ever after death. And these are the predominant views in the two largest religions, Christianity and Islam. And again, I emphasize in the mainstream of these because there are Islamic and Christian traditions that affirm rebirth, but they are considered outside of the mainstream. And then finally, thirdly, you have the idea that you just die. That's it. That's the end. No afterlife, no personal identity persisting, no consciousness persisting. And this is associated with the philosophy of materialism or physicalism, what was called in ancient India the Charvaka or Lokayata perspective, and which is very widespread today in the intellectual community globally. So these are our three options: rebirth, some kind of eternal afterlife, either pleasant or unpleasant, or just no afterlife at all. So, the structure of my argument, I have what I call a negative argument and a positive argument. The negative argument is essentially to say that the other two options, besides rebirth, have serious problems that make them difficult to accept. The one everlasting afterlife is typically affirmed in traditions, again, like Christianity, like Islam, that affirm the idea of some benevolent cosmic overlord, right? A God, a supreme being who is seen as good, as compassionate, as just. And this raises serious problems because if the very small finite lifetime that we have, even if someone has the fortune to live to be 100 years old, in terms of eternity, in terms of infinity, in terms of the cosmic time scale, that is almost nothing, right? This is a blip. And yet, based on that, we are asked to believe that you're either going to be rewarded forever or punished forever. And this, from my perspective, I would say does not make mathematical sense. I'm not capable of doing enough good or enough evil in a human lifetime, I think, to merit eternity. So this is a problematic view, I would say. Even though it's held by many people, it gives many people great comfort, but it seems to really not fit well when we with our logic if we think about the proportionality of one lifetime to one eternal infinite afterlife. And a very great philosopher of religion in the West, John Hick, who I had the good fortune to meet when I was in graduate school, he was a believer in rebirth. And he said something which struck me as very true. He said, I don't know enough. He said, I don't know anyone who's good enough to go to heaven or bad enough to go to hell. And most of us are a mix, right? Even Dr. Sebastian, who I think is one of the finest human beings I've ever met. And yet he said, I think I've done something that will make it difficult for me to have a human rebirth. And so we all have imperfections. And at the same time, it's hard to think of people who are completely evil, right? That there are those who do great harm in the world, but then they have also their moments of compassion. So we're a mix. And so if the universe is just, of course, that's a big question, right? But within most of the religious belief systems, we're in a just universe. If the universe is just, then it seems the afterlife should be something like this life, right? Where we have some amount of joy, some amount of suffering, right? Sukha, dukkha, based on the good we do and also the harm that we do. And we do both. So the one infinite afterlife, it seems you would have to be either perfectly evil or perfectly good to merit that. And one lifetime just does not seem to be enough to make that possible. So then some people reject, of course, the idea that there's any afterlife. And they affirm materialism. They say, well, consciousness really is just an effect of chemical activities in the brain. And when those activities cease, consciousness ceases, and that's the end. This really is an unnecessary assumption. People often associate materialism with science, so much so that they'll even call it the scientific worldview. But science is actually quite neutral on these metaphysical questions. Science does not ask the question, what is the nature of what ultimately is? It talks in terms of what is observable. And we can account for the observable world using a variety of different ontological models, different metaphysical systems. And the materialist system, though it's very popular, actually introduces some problems for science. The biggest one is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. We see again and again many neuroscientists, for example, affirming that consciousness is created by neurochemical processes in the brain. So we say, okay, exactly what process and how does this happen? The answer has not yet emerged. And I would submit that that's because we're operating with an assumption that is probably not correct. That it is as much an article of faith to say that consciousness comes from material interactions as to say that there's a soul or that there's something else, right? This is an affirmation. It's a claim, but it's really not scientifically validated. It's assumed very often. And in fact, you could make a different assumption that fits just as well with what is observable, that does not lead to this hard problem of consciousness. And of course, that's the idea that consciousness is just a feature of existence, that it does not emerge or come from anything, it is already present. And a growing number of scientists who are leaning this way. And to anticipate what I'm going to say in a moment, Jim Tucker and Ian Stevenson very much embrace this idea because it's consistent with the studies they've done of past life memories in children. So we'll come back to that. So we really don't need materialism to explain the world. And the idea of an afterlife, I think, gives so many of us so much hope and so much consolation that we reject it. I think in order to reject it, we need to have some pretty compelling reasons to do so. And materialism has really not given us that, in my opinion. So that leaves us with our third option, reincarnation. So that's the negative case. The other two options aren't that good. So we're left with this one. Now, what is the positive case for reincarnation? So it is logically elegant. Reincarnation gives an explanation of so many phenomena. In fact, Dr. Subhash Jain explained this so well, I really don't need to say much more. The whole question of nature and nurture. There are always these phenomena, these characteristics we have that are not explainable by either of those other two. Reincarnation or rebirth gives us that. The identical twins who have the same upbringing and the same genetics are have different personalities because they've brought different sanskaras, they've brought different traits into this life from previous lives. It fits very well. It's also philosophically elegant in terms of ethics. It gives an explanation for the unevenness of life in the world. We suffer to the degree that we've caused suffering. We are happy to the degree that we have done good. And if we can't account for that in this lifetime, then it must be something that comes from before, right? So there are various ways in which it's logically compelling. This is a very famous quote, of course, from the Bhagavad Gita, a Hindu text, but cited by the Jain teacher Yashovijaya approvingly. The wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. Never was there a time when you and I did not exist, nor is there any future when we shall cease to be. As the embodied soul passes from childhood to old age, the soul passes into another body at death. The wise are not deluded by these changes. Right? We don't have the question of how were we created. We have always existed, and we will always exist. This is very consoling, but also helps us to explain phenomena like consciousness, like ethics, and so on. The living being, the jiva, its journey through birth, life, and death. This is fueled by the concept of karma. I really don't think you can have coherently the concept of rebirth without the concept of karma, because karma provides the explanation of why rebirth happens in a particular form, in a particular time, in a particular place. And it brings the ethical character of rebirth into light, right? With the idea of karma. It's really essential to the idea of rebirth. We have our sanskaras, our character, our impressions, the habits that determine the nature of our karma, and the nature of our personality from lifetime, and indeed from moment to moment. Sometimes people ask, well, if there's rebirth, why don't we remember it? Well, what is passed on from life to life are the sanskaras, right? So it's not necessarily the case that someone is going to have clear recollection of rebirth. And of course, I often will ask students who raise this question, I'll say, do you remember being born? And typically, no, they do not remember being born. I say, but were you born? So, yes, I definitely was born. So, the fact that we cannot remember it doesn't mean it didn't happen. But we carry other things besides memory. But there is also this question of memory in at least some people, which I think gives strength to this argument. The last philosophical point I want to make is according to Max Weber, the father of the sociology of religion, he calls rebirth and karma, quote, the most complete formal solution of the problem of theodicy, that is, the problem of evil. He says it is the special achievement of the Indian teaching of karma, the belief in the transmigration of souls. He perceived the logical elegance of this model as a response to the problem of evil. It's also consistent with other things, and more recently, the conservation of information, which is a newer concept that philosophers of science and scientists have been putting forward, that information is never destroyed. Well, what do we bear from lifetime to lifetime? It is essentially information. So, uh, is past life memory, is that good empirical evidence for rebirth? Of course, previous speaker mentioned His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who according to Tibetan tradition is the 14th incarnation of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. He passed all of the tests that children are given who are candidates for this position, passed them with flying colors. He was able to identify all of the items that had belonged to the previous Dalai Lama. He had his incredible recall of detailed information, and which, and the Tibetans had sufficient faith in this to base an entire system of government upon it. So, and the when we turn to Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker, then I think we start entering the realm of science, and the positive case for rebirth becomes even stronger. Not just that this is logically elegant and very pleasing to us intellectually, but that there does appear to be real evidence for it. Ian Stevenson from University of Virginia collected thousands of cases of alleged past life memory in children. His successor, Dr. Jim Tucker, has refined Stevenson's methodology, and he's continued to collect accounts. When I say refine the methodology, and Dr. Jane mentioned this briefly as well, in Tucker's work, he's, for example, focusing on children who come from families that don't believe in rebirth, right? If people already believe in rebirth, and as they're being encouraged by parents. A really remarkable case here is Ryan Hammonds, who came from a Baptist family in Oklahoma. They did not believe in rebirth. In fact, they took their child to Dr. Tucker because they thought he might be possessed because he had these very vivid memories and he kept talking about them and about his other life. He correctly described large numbers of details from a relatively unknown actor named Marty Martin. The fact that Marty Martin is relatively unknown also is important. I don't know how many hundreds of people have claimed to be the rebirth of Cleopatra or Julius Caesar or some other famous person. Information about whose lifetimes is readily available, right? So you could read that and then maybe be influenced by that to think, oh, maybe I was that person. Nobody had ever heard of Marty Martin, right? And it took a great deal of research to uncover who this person was that Ryan was describing. His memory was so vivid that it even led to the correction of the public record of the death date of Marty Martin. The date of his death, his age, was incorrectly recorded in the public record. And what Ryan was saying was contradicting the public record. So Tucker said, well, it seems like Ryan has made a mistake. And he consulted Martin's family, and they said, no, he actually, the record said he was 59 years old when he died. He was actually 63 years old when he died. And the family corrected this. They said, no, Ryan is right. So this raises serious problems for materialism because there was some non-mechanistic fashion through which this very detailed information ended up in the mind of this child. So it's a very persuasive case. And and I'll go through this part very quickly. My time is getting short, and Dr. Jan already mentioned some of this. One thing I think that was not mentioned earlier was hypnotherapy, past life regression, near-death experiences, which Dr. Jane mentioned. These The near-death experiences are, I think, a field that's just beginning to be explored very deeply. Hypnotherapy is fascinating, but many people will dismiss it because it's possible to ask leading questions and to produce unreliable information. But it's interesting that it's there, and perhaps it could be refined further. My conclusion is that the arguments and available evidence suggest, at the minimum, that it's reasonable to believe in rebirth, at least as reasonable, and maybe more so, than believing in a single eternal afterlife or none at all. According to William James, it's perfectly legitimate to hold a belief that cannot be conclusively proven or disproven, so long as holding it causes no harm and actually brings benefit to one's life. And I would say that this is true of the doctrine of rebirth, that rebirth is such a belief, and that it might even be proven true as reincarnation research continues, because I think this is a field that is only in its infancy. So thank you very much for listening, and grateful for the ability to participate and share in this forum.
Thank you, Dr. Jeffrey. And really, I am again thankful to you. You spare some time for us during traveling. Once again, thank you very much. Now, time is short. I am not commenting on the lectures, talks. Now, I am directly coming to Dr. Pratap Sancheti. And I shall like to give a brief introduction of Dr. Sancheti. He is an experienced neurologist. He acquired post-graduation MD in 1974 and DM in neurology in 1985. He served Indian Armed Forces from 1974. He has deep knowledge of Jainology, Jain philosophy. He has been a professor of Jain Visvarthi Institute, Lucknow, Rajasthan since 2009. He, he has several publications in journals, chapters in books, and monograms, and on the editorial board of many journals. Now I invite Dr. Pratap Sancheti to give on talk on some questions on the concept of reincarnation. So thank you very much, Dr. Pratap Sancheti. Please go ahead. प्लीज माइक ऑन कर लीजिए सर माइक ऑन कर लीजिए सर
Yeah.
Yes, now it is on.
A slide is coming.
Yes, slide is coming. You can increase a little bit. You can zoom it. Yes.
I'll try, but I'll be failing it.
No
Anyway, I'll
problem.
continue
Go
with
ahead.
this one.
No problem. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Dr. Anil Jain, for including me in this forum and asking me to put up some thoughts. My job has been made easy by the wonderful lecture by Dr. Subhash Jain, followed by Dr. Ashok Jain and the Dr. Jeffrey. Now, my worry or my question comes, if you believe in the Jainism, things are okay. But if you don't believe, or if you are non-atheist, then what? What will happen to the concept of the rebirth? Can we give some arguments? Can we give some logic to it? Perhaps right now we are in infancy. People have already told that the reincarnation is nothing but acquiring a new body. It will be physical body and the soul will be coming from somewhere else. It's an interesting concept, but a very good theory has been put forward in the Jainism and in many other religions. But I'm afraid to say there are hardly any logic or any evidences which are there. Some theories which have been put mainly by the psychologists, other than Jainism, paranormal theory, that the body perishes, but soul lives amongst the loved one, and it reappears at an appropriate time. Plato says that our limit of the knowledge is there. So once that limit is over, the soul goes outside it and acquires a new place to explore the world further. dream theory. It says we just wake up from a very long, confusing and vivid dream in which we were there till in the present life, and we come into a new dream. Another is which we often see in the this literature, parallel universe theory, that we come from some other universe, stay here, and then go back to that universe. But the space and time will not be the same. Main important is the cosmic theory, that mind is linked to the consciousness. Dr. Jeffrey has just now told us. And in universe, body are not related to the cosmos. That is the main argument of the present scientific evidence, considering to the, well, mind, particularly when I go further, I wish to say that I'm not against the reincarnation, or it's a beautiful concept which explains many of the theories, many of the processes which are going on. These already have been pointed out by Dr. Jeffrey and Dr. Subhash Jain earlier. So I'm not going to repeat. But my 2 points which are there, they rightly said it usually occurs in that between 2 to 5 years of the age. This I am quoting the Dr. Tucker's study. But then fade. Why fade? Why not become stronger? As we learn more things, we become stronger. So why it fades? Why a person, if doesn't visit to his previous place or previous persons, the knowledge of the previous birth fades? That's the one big question. The second thing which Dr. Subhash Jain was mentioning, that it is non-violent actions which brings us to the Manushya Yoni. But if you look into the statistics, more than 70% of the documented and studied cases are related to the violent act, either violence committed by someone else or by the suicide by himself, which is also a form of the violence. So why the rebirth occurs in the people who have done the suicide? That's the two big questions. So coming back to some of the points, not repeating the previous two lectures, which are in my inquisitiveness, the reincarnation as defined in the West and the East are quite different. Is it so or is it not? It is just our method of understanding the things. East and West. While our Eastern, be it the Hinduism or Jainism, Buddhism, they all talk of the reincarnation related to the karmas. But in the West, they are not related to the karmas. So that is a one point. But my question comes, is reincarnation necessary even one had not attained the moksha? It means one has to go into the cycle. That is the one big question. And why? If it is that one has to go to the cycle, why I can't stop my cycle here? Why my soul, the personal soul which is there in my own body, need to go into all the cycles? Why cannot get rid here? Another important question which comes to my mind, is the reincarnation possible to the sub-nigod life also? That is the air, Vayu Kai, or the Jal Kai, or the Agni Kai, or all these. So sub-nigod lives, is it possible? Possibly yes, but I couldn't find any references. But my big question below is the reincarnation in and to the matter. Is the matter a continuum of the life or Pudgal? So here with these four questions, I personally feel the whole confusion has lied because we have considered life, soul, mind, and all other things as an entity, not as a continuum, which is perhaps the incorrect or not logical. Another big question which comes, there are very few instances in diverse geographical and cultural areas. Means a person who is having the rebirth, recollection, or the things, hardly there are few. Dr. Jeffrey has mentioned one or two cases, but not many. Many are almost in the same areas and in the same cultural areas. And but if you look into the total world population, having the 2,500 documented cases, or the 10,000 cases is a very minuscule number. Why so? Why every one of us don't have got the uh, awareness of our previous birth events? And the last question, which comes many times from the forums, there are increase in number of living people, including human. It means, are we going into the spiritual strength? Perhaps our practical demonstration, practical experience says no. Right now we are in a deteriorating side. Or when Kal Chakra comes, even when the Kal Chakra comes when it is going into the opposite side, the number of people increases, but the bad events, they are kept on increasing. So why so? If it is so that good karmas bring you to the rebirth to the human yoni, that's a big question. So these are some of the points. So I just thought how I understand. I put, or I consider, I am not a big person to put it. Soul is a law of nature rather than an entity. It's a law of nature, like many laws of natures are there. It is a continuum of the evolution, and soul is one of the event. We all are part of those events, and soul is the higher explained. All explained processes, be it karma, mind, and soul, can be quantified as frequencies. That is the where we can quantify them as a frequency. Particularly if you look into the right now, we are exploring the mind, and the brain. They can be explained or they can be explored in terms of the frequencies, alpha, beta, gamma. You all are aware. But then there are many more frequencies, many more events like magnetoencephalography or evoke potential studies. So these are the events which are not visible, which are not quantifiable, which are massless, which fulfills all the events which are there, which cannot be quantified, and they are on the frequencies. Even if you look into the pudgals or the matter, they can be also converted from the frequencies. The famous equation is there, and there are many physicians, sorry, uh, uh, this one experts in the physics who can more vouch on this one. And some of these frequencies have been mapped, and many more are waiting to be explored. Now, my point is that these waves float in the universe, in the unexplained bodies, resulting in paranormal events and the actions. That's why we are getting only few of them, not the many, or not as a universal event. The rebirth is not taken as a universal event. So, in the reincarnation, it's a sophistication word of recycling. Like you see a tree, the flower matures, and then it turns and it goes into the soil, and again it takes a birth after in some other way like that. So are we in that cycle also? So it's a sophisticated word of putting the recycling rather than putting reincarnation. If you look into the real word of the reincarnation, harness is the flesh. It is a flesh. So you're consenting to a new flesh body. So reincarnation is not related to the soul. It is related to the flesh. So my thought will be that scientists and philosophers should come together to solve many of the points which are there. I'm not going to take further. Thanks for the listening.
Thank you, Dr. Sancheti. You have given your last thought very nicely. And uh, before I comment, I request the audience, now it is open for the questions. Please raise your hands and we will call one by one. And again, I request you please directly come to the question without any prefix or suffix. So I am seeing one hand is raised. Dr. Elsie Yen.